Good evening, everybody. Welcome and thank you for coming tonight. The purpose of this meeting is to update and inform you of the status of the past, current, and future testing of the private wells downgrading of the North Carver Landfill, the extension of the water main, and other future plans. My name is Kevin Forg. I'm joined by Arthur Borden, who's the chairman of the Board of Health, Eric Mueller, member of the Board of Health, Luke Fabry, who is with Geologic Field Services, and Bruce Haskell from Langdon Environmental. Bruce is going to be doing, I guess, the bulk of the presentation tonight. At the conclusion of the presentation, there'll be plenty of opportunity for questions and answers. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Bruce. When you do have a question, if you can go to the mic and pose your question. If there's anybody here that does not have an agenda and would like one, there's some extra ones on that seat there. So with that.
Good evening. My name is Bruce Haskell from Langdon Environmental, with a firm retained to do the assessment and monitoring at the landfill. I just want to also mention that Angela Gallagher from Mass DEP is on my cell phone and will hopefully be listening as best she can to the discussions tonight. If you have any specific questions for her, I'll try to make sure that's directed to her and she can hear it fine. The purpose of the meeting tonight is really to present the existing impacts on potential, existing information on potential impacts from the North Carver landfill on the homes that are along Plymouth Street and Hines Avenue and Captain Perkins Lane out there, and to talk about the next steps that we're going to be undertaken by the town, along with the schedule for those next steps, and then to respond to any questions you might have about those activities. Just want to give you a quick brief history of the landfill. Obviously, you all know where it is. The landfill stopped accepting trash, solid waste, around 1974. It started in the 1950s, reportedly, and was capped between 2003 to about 2006. Now has a solar field on top of it out there. During the capping process, there was chlorinated solvents, and solvent is anything that you might have, in your in a garage or for industrial purposes, found in groundwater and private wells along Lakenham Drive, down gradient of the site out there in those private wells. Those wells were disconnected and were connected to public water back in the 2000s. 1990s and the 2000 timeline, and the well use was discontinued for those wells. The town also installed a groundwater pump and treat system on the Cranberry Bog, sort of behind the property at about 164 Plymouth Street, and the intent of that was to stop the chlorinated solvents from migrating any further towards the private wells on Plymouth Street. That system was operated by the town until about 2018, when there were no more chlorinated solvents found in any of the groundwater monitoring wells that were out at the site, out at the property and out at the landfill, and in the system that's there. The town is required to continue to monitor the landfill groundwater conditions. And when I say groundwater, just to step back, all your private wells are essentially extracting groundwater from underneath the ground and putting it into your homes out there. The monitoring wells that are there are static wells that samples can be taken, sent to an analytical laboratory, and analyzed for a wide variety of parameters out there. When we receive those results, and those samples are collected at least on a twice per year basis and have been collected by the town since since the 1990s timeline. The standard for Mass DEP, Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection, or Mass DEP, is to compare the results of those monitoring wells to drinking water standards. And so the drinking water standards, and I'm just going to be loosely define them as, if I had a public water supply, the North Carver Water District, or a public water supply, those are the standards that I have to meet at the tap for a water supply to be sure it's safe for consumption out there. So it's in the monitoring wells, those are the comparisons that are made. It's a conservative comparison in a monitoring well because nobody's drinking the water out of the monitoring well, but the intent is to allow it to be assessed to go further. The results, so about 2016-17 timeline, Mass DEP added another constituent that's common in groundwater downgrading of landfills. It's called 1,4-dioxane, and you'll hear that term a lot, and a lower detection limit than was previously required, and required us to analyze that in the monitoring wells around the landfill. When I say the monitoring wells around the landfill, there's some that are just really proximate to the landfill, and then there are several that are further downstream. One is behind the home at 164 Plymouth Street out there. So they are fairly good distance, several hundred feet from the landfill. And that well has always been the end beacon monitoring point to make sure that there was no groundwater moving towards the private homes along Plymouth Street and other homes in that area, and to make sure that there was no groundwater moving in that direction that was causing any issues. When that final well was sampled, it had a exceedance of a Office of Research and Standard, basically a Mass DEP standard for the 1,4-dioxane. And that triggered a requirement to sample any private well. Now we're talking about private drinking water wells within 500-foot radius of that monitoring well. The town has been sampling those private wells of those residents along Plymouth Street since around November 2017. For the 1,4-dioxane and volatile organic compounds, which are related to the solvents, to see if anything has migrated past out there, and has continued that on a biannual, in other words, every 6 months basis when those homes are accessible and can be sampled out there, and that will continue into the future. Mass DEP has established a health-based standard for the 1,4-dioxane of 0.3 parts per billion. And a part per billion is a very minute, a small amount in a sample out there. They've defined 1,4-dioxane as what they call an emerging contaminant associated with landfills. And it is one of several emerging contaminants that are associated with landfills that the town is going to be required to sample for into the future out there. 1,4-dioxane, just to get an idea of what it's from, it was used in the manufacture of solvents out there, and it was used as something that was used to break down product from solvents. It's also used in a lot of household products. The way it's been described is it's anything that has suds, anything that was detergents, soaps, things like that. It was used in the manufacture of them, and there's a residual amount left in the product that you would use. Tide was and several things that are out there historically that it was used in that. So it's a common household product. The 0.3 parts per billion is a very low standard for comparison compared to other contaminants that might be out there. So we have continued to sample the monitoring well near Plymouth Street semi-annually out there, and then the private wells. And we have found in 3 of the residents along Plymouth Street detections of 1,4-dioxane, and again, I can get into the detail of how frequently. Some of the homes have been sampled 6 and 7 times, and maybe only have one detection, excuse me. None of the detections are above Mass DEP's guidelines for public drinking water supplies, but it's detected out there. So I'll just give a quick overview. When you take a sample of a well, and we can describe this in a little more detail, the field technician goes in, they run your water for a while, they collect a sample, so it's really a sample of what's coming out of the well out there, and then they send it to a Mass DEP approved laboratory for analysis out there. The detection limit is when the Mass DEP lab runs the sample through their process, it's how low they can detect out there. And again, I'll give you an idea of what a part per billion is. It's a drop of water in an Olympic-sized swimming pool. So there's a limit to how low they can go. Typically what they want to do is get to detection limits that are half of what the drinking water standard is okay? We have historically been able to get very close to that or below that in almost in every sample that we've collected from the private residences out there. Again, as I mentioned, 3 of the residences have had detections below the standard, but have had detections. There are no detections in the 4 other homes along Plymouth Street that have been sampled, and the town is currently providing bottled water to the residences where 1,4-dioxane is detected. If you want some more information on 1,4-dioxane, Mass DEP's has a frequently asked questions page, and it does a very nice job of discussing that it's not something that should be concerned about with bathing or certain other things like that, but it does a nice job of describing of this different scenarios of how somebody might do that, and recommends that somebody who has it above the standard gets bottled water. With that, we've met with DEP, and again, DEP is a regular partner, or not part, but the regulatory agency overseeing all the activities that go on out there. And what the town is, the next steps that the town is doing right now is the town is going to extend public water supply to the private residences along Plymouth Street. I believe it's 7 homes and out there that are going to get the private water extended across the culvert on the Muddy Pond Brook, and then come up Plymouth Street. They're going to evaluate extending the public water to the homes on Hines Avenue and Captain Perkins Lane. The contract for design and permitting of that water line has already been awarded by the town, and that work is getting started and in process out there. All the private wells that receive public water will be abandoned. So if you have a private well and the town comes with the water, that well will have to be abandoned. Obviously, we don't want you continuing to use the well once provided public water out there. Our schedule is to do the design and permitting of the water line. One of the complicating issues is the culvert over the brook. May need to be reconstructed to provide for the water line to come across. Appropriate the funds for construction at next year's Springtown meeting in 2021, with construction happening in the summer of 2021. We are going to continue to sample the private wells in the homes, all the homes along Plymouth Street, and we can talk a little bit how that does. We're going to extend the sampling of the private wells to the homes along Hines Avenue and Captain Perkins Lane. So if you're from one of the homes that we have not sampled in those areas, we'll be requesting to come and collect a sample from your home, from your well, within the next couple of weeks out there. Our next round of sampling, the agenda said April 2020, based on some discussions with the town and some pushing from Kevin. We're going to try to schedule that for the week of March 23rd out there. Again, we are flexible if somebody needs different times to be collected. And the town will continue to provide bottled water to the homes with the detectable concentrations of 1,4-dioxane. Obviously, if any homes are added to that list, then from the next sampling rounds, then we will obviously the town will provide water to them. One thing for the 3 homeowners that have received the received the bottled water, Mass DEP has requested that we receive a confirmation. The process that the town has put in place is essentially a reimbursement process for the water. We've been asked to confirm that the water is actually being purchased, and we want to talk about a process where potentially there's an order that puts into Poland Spring or some bottled water system where it's regular deliveries to the home out there, obviously still paid for by the town out there, and we'll talk about that further with those 3 homeowners as we move forward out there. With that, that's a broad overview of where we are and what we're doing. And I think with that, I can answer try to answer any questions that anybody might have. Sure.
I have a question. You said you're extending the water line up Plymouth Street, and that all houses that connect to it, the wells will be abandoned. Will they be tested and abandoned? Will this be a choice?
Right now, if the process that we're proposing is to extend the water up the street. So essentially, the town doesn't want to continue to test a well if they provided public water to somebody. And
On the street, I guess is the question.
let me look at the exact map. 7 homes. It's going to go up to 154 from the street. 153 in this area here. I apologize, the map is
Sure,
so
no,
small.
That's
Okay.
his.
Yeah. Yeah, so, I mean, the town doesn't, you know, the idea is if you have a well and you're pumping out water that might have this constituent in it and using it to irrigate your yard, then you're going to be just recirculating it back into the system out there, and maybe it ends up down, you know, further downstream there, whereas you know, if it gets up in the upper water table and moves along. So the idea is, you know, that those wells would have to be abandoned if there's a public water supply to that particular home out there. Yes, sir.
What are the 7 houses that are gonna get water, supposedly get water?
Let's see out the exact numbers. Oh, yeah, thank you. These are all on Plymouth Street: 156, 157, 161, 162, 164, 165, and 170. And again, we haven't fully, you know, the engineer's going to look at the design of the water main and where that might make sense to extend at that point there. Thank you.
I got 2 wells, that, actually 3, but I abandoned one quite a few years ago. I do have irrigation from the well, of course, that goes right back in the ground.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I'm sorry, what house are you?
161.
161.
And also, when they did the water test, I requested that I be there because when they tested it, I have a filtration system, and that was not disconnected. So,
And maybe Luke, you talked to the sampling, we try to get a sample of the well water itself. And that's, you know, from a outside spigot or something like that, that might be, you know, more representative of something that hadn't been filtered, treated, or, you know, whatever. I mean, I do believe that this 1,4-dioxane, typical water treatment systems will not remove it from the water out there, but it's not, you know, out there. Oh, sure.
I'm sorry, will the residents be receiving water at the expense of the town after they're hooked up? Is this something that's included in the budget, or, I mean, it's because technically it is the town that's the cause of the base problem of this. Is there gonna be a ration, per se, of water allowed, or, because they did pay for wells, and it's a lot cheaper to run your own well than it is to actually run off town services. So I'm just curious, are they gonna be rationed a certain amount of water at?
I don't have a full, I mean, that's a question for somebody, you know, maybe for the town
Sure.
to answer. I know that the discussion with the town was, obviously, they'll pay to provide the water, and there would not be any betterment, if I recall. That's, you know, out there. So, you know, there's no, like, if I was just running a water by your house and this wasn't the situation, that, you know, there would be a betterment charge to your home to have that service by your house. That's going to be waived by the town, and the cost will be covered for that. But as far as the actual payment of the, you know, so many gallons a day of water out there, and you'd have to ask the town.
Sure.
Yeah.
And what's the projected start date and finish date on this?
So the idea is that it will go to the spring town meeting, you know, next spring, May 2021, and that the you know, the money would be available at July 1st. So it would start sometime in July and probably take 3 months.
Did you say 2021?
2021, yes.
Is there any, I know this probably isn't directed at you, but is there any reason why it's not going to this particular year's town meeting? This is something we voted on in 2018 and it was approved by the town. So I'm curious to why, you know, it's taken so long for them to get started?
So right now, the money, there's funding for the design and the permitting. Obviously, we have to go through Conservation Commission. There's a process to go through. And that contract was awarded within the last couple of weeks out there. I think the intent is to take a bid price, a construction bid price, to the town meeting, and that wouldn't be available by this spring's town meeting out there.
Well, we've already, the estimated cost was already provided to the town in 2018 at the town meeting when we allocated $350,000 for the extension of the water line up to, I believe it was roughly Pine City Road. So I'm curious as to what the cost changes, or maybe a shorter water line, or why it, I'm really pushing for it to get on this year's town warrant, because I think these people have waited long enough, and a lot of them have waited without ever knowing that they were in danger or in a path of critical exposure as identified by the Mass DEP. So I'm not pushing you. I want to push the town to get this on this town warrant, because this is something that's still open to us, available to put on the town warrant for this year.
Again, that would be a decision the town would have to make to push it.
Is that something that you might recommend?
Well, I mean, obviously, the faster the water gets in, the water system gets in out there. But I mean, there is some timing issues with obviously winter construction and things like that might push it to next year. Next year in any case out there.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
So, with the houses that have registered positive, is there a plan to test houses beyond that to follow the plume of the 1 odds?
Yes. The proposal is to move up. So essentially, any plume that's out there, if there is one that's moving beyond that, we move up towards Muddy Brook, Pond Brook, that runs behind the homes out there on Captain Perkins Lane and Himes Avenue. So we're proposing to test the homes on those homes. That's what some of the residents are here on all the wells in those neighborhoods, those two cul-de-sacs.
Why has it taken so long to start to push to go up Hines and Captain Perkins?
Essentially, because there hasn't been any detections above the DEP standard in any of the private wells that we've found so far.
But it's been at measurable concentration.
Yes, it has. Yeah.
Which is what created the critical exposure pathway.
And now you're saying that they're going to start to follow the critical exposure pathway, and if you haven't detected anything over the drinking limit, then why would you go up Hines? Or
Because the
why
solid
would
waste
you
division
go up
is
Captain
getting
Perkins?
involved.
Essentially, because if we're going to run a water line down Plymouth Street, and there's something, and we find something, the wells could all be screened in different locations, different levels. If we're going to run a water line down Plymouth Street, it makes perfect sense to see if we can run it up, if we need to run it up those two streets and make that assessment at this point.
When was it determined that we weren't going to do quarterly testing like we were assured in the August 3rd meeting with the residents, myself, my husband, and now it's every 6 months?
I don't recall that, but I mean, certainly we've done more frequent testing over the last 6 to 8 months of that out there.
Now, I'm sorry, there is a house on the same water table level as the Muddy Brook or Muddy Pond that's in the Cranberry Bog areas. They're a much lower water table. It's located at 148A Plymouth Street. Has that been included in the testing? Is that planned to be included in the testing? And
could you help me out and just show me
Sure.
exactly where that is out there?
Sure.
I'm not sure. I'm not picturing that.
this is the North Carver Landfill
Yes,
here. And do you mind if I?
No, I have my hand raised, but you ain't addressing it.
Oh, sorry, I couldn't see you back
No, you
there,
couldn't.
Alan.
No, your fault.
This is the plane here, and this is a hill, of course, but this is where the Muddy Brook, and there's a house right here on that same Cranberry Plain level. I believe he's only got a foot or two above the level of the water table of the running water.
So the lot for 148 is shown at the corner
Well,
here?
that's my house, but you see this road here?
Okay.
It comes up and it goes down the hill, and it's on the same water table plane. I know it was originally required to be tested in the original round of testing back in 2017. but
In
I'm-
2013.
We were testing.
2013?
2013.
But I don't know if any further testing has gone on, and if that will affect the length of the water line, which would come up here, and I don't know how you'd connect it back.
We have, I mean, again, that's another
Right.
part up there, but again, if there's a home on that property, I think we should test that.
Well, if it was tested in 2013,
It was not. There were no houses tested in 2013.
somebody just said to that.
I
No, that
said
was when
they
it
were
was
told
ordered.
to test.
That was when it was
in
Oh, so they,
That wasn't-
the first that I was aware that they tested was the residential homes, it was after MW1 tested positive behind number 164 plant.
And that would have been 2017.
That was November 2017.
That was after the
Correct.
failure of the filtration system?
When we got,
The filtration system did not fail, it was no longer necessary out there, it did not fail.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
clearly that the plume has emerged since the hydrological changes from,
no, not actually. Prior to this, they were sampling for 1,4-dioxane, the detection limit that was well above the detection limits that we're using now. So whether it was there or not, we weren't seeing at that level.
now what was the detection limit of your equipment, 2.52
Well,
or?
Back, I would have to look at the analytical, the lab sheets, it's not my equipment. It goes to the lab.
I
sheet.
understand that.
But that, so when the drinking water standard was reduced to 0.3, then we started using different methodologies to get to a half of that, where our target detection was 0.15.
At what point did you reach that?
Well, we started working on this in 2017,
Okay.
after it was detected in MW21. That was November 2017. January 2018 was the first round of private well testing that was done on Plymouth Street. And we tested 165, 157, there was no sample, 161, 162, 164. And then we tested again in June 18, December 18, July 19, October 19, December 19.
Now,
So we were doing quarterly rounds of sampling with the private water wells. And we're gonna do another one, which would be the fourth quarterly round in a row.
I know, but he just said it's gonna be every 6 months.
We sample the landfill every 6 months. And this evolves around the subject of critical exposure pathways. So there's two regulatory programs that are working. The MCP, which is the hazardous waste regulations, and the solid waste regulations. Under the MCP, if you have detection in a private well, it's considered a critical exposure pathway that requires further evaluation. The fact that you're below the drinking water standards does not make it a significant risk. And if this was strictly an MCP site, then we would determine that there was no imminent hazard and that there was not a significant risk, and the critical exposure pathway would be closed. Because the solid waste program does not work under the same set of regulations, and for every landfill is a 30-year post-closure monitoring period, that critical exposure pathway is kind of an overlap in between the two programs. So, I don't know if that helped you understand that. In terms of expanding get back to this location here. Before this cutoff well pumping treat system was established, the state and the town conducted a area-wide evaluation to determine what the geology was and the direction that the plumes were flowing in. And it was basically flowing down like this and turning and following the Muddy Brook. And the sandy unit that contained the plume, as the topography rises up in this area, pinches out against a glacial till unit that is low permeable material. So the reason why this was selected as a cutoff location is because that was the direction the plume was following in that little river bed. That, Muddy Pond, before we were here, Muddy Pond flowed out Muddy Brook, and the construction of the impoundment of Muddy Pond and the construction of the cranberry bogs, we put our fingerprint on the direction of groundwater flow by, lowering the water levels, raising the water level, etc. But after this wall was established, it basically stopped the plume from progressing further down Muddy Brook. And after capping the landfill, the concentrations of all of the VOCs and chlorinators, et cetera, have dropped tremendously within the landfill and the perimeter of the landfill. So following Muddy Brook would be the logical location to follow if there were to be more 1,4-dioxane detections. So that's why we're proposing to go down this area to see if it does exist, because even the treatment system that was there, 1,4-dioxane would have slipped through it. It would have gone through that treatment system. And the reason why it wasn't being treated for is because previously the detection limits were higher. It was not a contaminant of concern up until the mid-2015-16. We started testing for it because they realized that it was out there. So we're going to follow this one. Captain Perkins Drive is a lot less likely, but since we're coming up in this direction, the idea is we sample all of those to find out whether or not there's an exposure. And if there's an exposure, then it's the town's responsibility to provide water.
Detection, right? Not necessarily exposure.
Well, if it's in the drinking water of the well,
Yeah.
then the exposure would be in actual drinking. And a home filtration of the carbon system or a sediment filter or something like that is not going to take it out. And there is an overlap between the two programs, which makes some of this more complicated. Because you have to satisfy both programs. I don't know if that explains anything.
So, I mean, to answer the question, if it's a home at that 148A, there, we'll collect a sample from that well. Just to answer the oh, okay. It's out there.
That point, the wall that has been adduced. I hope you'll excuse me, I came out a moment later, I might have missed this. How was it determined which houses would have the water sample?
500-foot radius from the monitoring well that had the detection above the standard.
Okay.
Is that property lines or well?
500, but it's house wells, actual
Was
wells.
there any work from the DEP governing that, requiring that?
That's the standard, the regulations.
The regulations.
Yeah.
Did that list any specific houses?
No.
No. It's in the so I could be in Plymouth and it's 500 feet. It's a standard. And if we found it above the standard in one of the drinking water wells, that 500 feet would again start up again. So.
Now I'll say that we've sampled. We've only had 4 detections, and there have been 29 samples collected from 7 private wells, and we've had 4 detections total in 3 of the wells. Number 165 has had 2 detections. And I think to answer one of your questions about the timing of the water line, from 2018 on, we were not getting any detections. And then, so there was a question as to whether or not the water line was needed. And then we had another detection at 165 Plymouth Street in 2019.
December of 2019,
Yes,
yeah.
excuse me, what did I say?
Yeah, December of 2019. The end of
December
yeah.
2019, they kind of got this, more in gear.
Okay.
But those houses weren't tested at pre-testing round.
Some of them were, some of them have not been, and we've been trying to, we do the sampling, and we knock on the doors, and there are some people that have not responded back to us and are not home when we go there. And we can't, go into people's houses and take their water.
Well, I understand that, but notice is supposed to be given.
My understanding is that notices have been given, and we've been sampling, like say, 56 Plymouth Street. There was one sample missed in July because nobody was, we took 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 samples out of 6 rounds because nobody was there in July. And 161, we had 1 round missed in July of 2019. 162 Plymouth Street, we've hit it every time. 164 Plymouth Street, we've hit it every time. 165 Plymouth Street, we did not get him the first round or the third round, and then we've been sampling him since. And, people aren't always there when we go. So, we're doing the best that we can, and I believe that the Board of Health has been sending out notices a week or so prior to us coming down to do sampling.
This lady's been waiting to ask a
Oh, I'm
question.
sorry.
My question is about Captain Perkins Drive. I live on the extreme far end of Captain Perkins, the furthest back, but some of my neighbors live closer to Plymouth Street. If one of those neighbors trips your alarm for this solvent, do I get town water? Would you just come up the whole street?
If we had more detections, we'd probably, the first step would be to deploy the 500-foot radius and keep sampling until we know that we've gotten to the end of it. And then the affected homes would be part of the program.
I think, I think if say somebody 2 houses over had it and you didn't have it there, it wouldn't make much sense. It's not a 2-mile long road here to just run it to everybody on the road, because these are not. When you take a sample, it's seasonal. The concentrations can change, with time and things like that. So it wouldn't make any sense to run it, to 2 houses and then not pick up the last 2 houses or 2 sets of houses across the street from each other. So, I would say generally, I can't see a scenario where you wouldn't just take the entire, provide it to the entire road, even if your house was, as you said, Captain Perkins gets a little further afield of where we think the plume is moving at this point.
And what will happen if no one on Captain Perkins trips the limit or is detected? I'm not sure what the phrase is.
So one of the things we have to take a look at in concurrently with this is and Luca mentioned the nature and extent of the how the groundwater plume might react and how it might move in what direction there. And so I think one of the other concurrent tasks is to say, all right, well, it's not there today or in 3 months or in 6 months out there, but it could be there in the future. There's a potential for it there, in which case, again, that's where the purpose of this, of extending the program up those two streets is to find out, is to get a better understanding of what the potential is for exposures and address them, essentially. Yeah.
And along that line, one of the difficulties we have is that we don't know how your wells were constructed. We don't know what depths that they were put into, and a number of them are old enough that they're not records regarding that. If you have information like that, it helps us understand where in the saturated thickness we're drawing samples from. And it does matter because somebody might have a rock well, somebody might have a shallow sand well. And it matters, and it helps kind of figure out the distribution patterns. So.
And we do have some of the information from the town.
We do.
Out there that they have available, but it's whether the person who installed your well when the house was built or whenever actually turned in the information to the, as they were required to out there. So it's hit or miss.
Colombo here, because every time the question gets answered, I just have one more little question. But I'm really, and I feel like I am like Colombo, I'm really confused here. My house is not within the area, but my water was getting tested a while back. And I think it was back before the water station, the treatment station got shut down. And I don't recall when it stopped, because nothing was ever found, I don't believe. But it was, you know what year it was? It was back before that, right?
Let's say it was getting tested in movies.
So it was,
2012.
yeah, 2012 that I recall. And so I was kind of curious if that was being done, why it was being done, and why it was ceased to be done.
I came across, getting ready for this meeting, I came across, there was some historic testing of some of the wells that was associated with some other, it wouldn't have been with this 1,4-dioxane issue. And what happened was, I think they took a fair amount of samples, and I believe, I don't remember the constituent, but it was sort of put aside, it was sort of determined it was a lab issue or something like that, that wasn't a real issue out there. But it was around 2013, would that make sense or so, out there? And because I was getting ready for this meeting, I didn't delve back into that, but we can take a better look at that, what that was out there.
How would I know to find that out? You know, I'm misremembering, she's misremembering, and you saw.
So every report that's been filed for this system out there is on DEP's website, okay? And if you go onto Mass DEP searchable sites, and you'll come up, and then site number, I'll get you the number for it before, but I think we can provide it to Kevin again. I don't remember the number off the top of my head, but it's on there. If you search North Carver Landfill, and there is dozens and dozens of reports. And if you remember 2012, 2013, they're chronological. You can probably, sort of eliminate, go back to that information there. Again, it was before we were involved, but I did see those.
Have you people been around and fought or done anything with the high water table compared to a low water table? Like right now, we've had a lot of rain this year, no snow. Yeah. Summertime, we might have a drought. I mean,
Right.
different variation.
So I'm going to answer his question first, sir. The number is 4-268.
Okay.
4-00026.
Yeah, you got to have all the right zeros, otherwise the system doesn't kicks you out.
That's true. So the solid waste program sets up their monitoring programs to target high water and low water. So for the past 25 years, they've been trying to target high water and low water by sampling April and usually in the fall, like November or December. And they do that. Our quarterly sampling, groundwater does come up and down sometimes relatively quickly. And actually, even with the cranberry facilities, they artificially raise and lower the water tables. But they do make an effort. In my experience, over the past 30 years, there's usually not a way to tie groundwater fluctuations into contaminant concentrations, because there's a lag time between them. That you just, there are some places that we know when the water table comes up, there's like a smear zone of gasoline and petroleum, and so it comes up into it, and we'll see higher concentrations. But things like this, where there's not, the contamination's not coming up, and the water's not coming up into a contaminated zone, it's just flowing. There's almost no seasonal rhyme or reason.
Sorry.
Sir?
Yeah, a couple points. One, I have an email from DEP that says that the first level detected, and I'm not going to get into what's detectable and potable and all that, it was 2013, number one, to answer one question.
For dioxin?
That's correct. It wasn't part of the testing protocol, but it showed up in a test well.
Yeah, that would have been in a landfill well.
Well, even, but that even, well, yeah,
Just making a point.
Yeah, don't.
Time frame, okay? Number one. To answer the question about the town meeting 2018, 2019, it was defunded, to answer your question.
No,
That's why it's not being done in the timely manner we would like.
Right.
The town did that, so they took away the money. Now we're back at that, okay? And then there's a third point. Prior to you folks being involved in testing, there was another test outfit. Because I kicked this hornet's nest over back in 2017, when I noticed that that filter building wasn't running anymore. Prior to that, once a year, the testing company doing the sampling would come to my residence. They would notify us saying that they would like to test our private well. Because I live at 164 and we've got that test well, okay? So there was testing on private wells. I don't know what they were testing for. It's probably the VOCs, not the one for dioxin, but they were testing private wells for that.
Yeah, the issue was that the 1,4-dioxane didn't have the lower, you know, it could have been there at the levels that we're finding now, but we were blind to it, essentially, yeah.
I understand that, but
Yeah.
I'm just making a point.
Yeah.
Everyone was throwing around this 2017, there was testing prior to that for other things, and it did show up then. The other thing is I brought this up in front of the select board meeting last month. I forget the date. If you take that list you have about the amount of samples taken, okay, and then the amount of detections, it comes out to almost 23% of the time. And then if you do that math up and did a monthly test or a daily test, that's a lot of exposure. Because I know that you can't test daily or weekly or monthly, but the percentage of that showing up in a private well is a lot. If you take it from a daily basis, and no one can say if it's going to be my well one day, their well one day, his well another day. You know.
Well, I think you can say there's some consistency. If it's in one well, it could be consistently found in that well. And again, at some point when you're sampling, there's a frequency, and it's the same. It's the same result. I mean, and I'm not discussing. Yeah, so it's saying, yeah.
I'm not trying to overplay it, but I don't want to have anyone downplay the amount that this could be in the wells on a daily or weekly or monthly basis, any given well. Because today, when we talk to the town, until recently, it's like, it's not an issue, or it's nothing to be concerned about. I think over time it is.
Or it's below the DEP standard.
And I don't want to.
No, I mean, I would say if it's in a well, you test it one day, it's representative of what's there a week later. You know, it's not. I'm not. Yeah, I think that's fair. Yeah, yeah,
That's not
yeah.
even accurate, because if we have really bad storms, it could come out of the landfill.
No, the landfill's capped, and it doesn't necessarily. Yes, I mean, yeah, but it's pretty consistently coming out of the landfill at consistent concentrations. Again, we monitor wells right around the base of the landfill out there, so. Good. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, to your point, because of the seasonality of things, there is actually an ebb and flow to the water table and the concentrations. And to answer some people's questions about whether they have a deep pump or a shallow pump, typically if you have a jet pump, that means that it's likely not drawing deeper than 30 feet. So, in other words, when there is a change in the water table, the samples will be more sensitive, which is why I know in the August meeting we had encouraged an increase to maybe quarterly testing to maybe drill down into the information, not drilling wells, to get a better handle on what it is we were really even looking at from an empirical standpoint. The one thing I was not aware of, and to this lady's point, question was, Captain Perkins is very close to 165 Plymouth Street. You can see it's well within that 500 foot, I guess you could call it a trigger distance. I know 165 because that's where I live. Had one, I believe one of the samples recently was a 0.29, which is darn close to 0.3. And I know another one was also detectable. Those should, if based on what you've said tonight, I was not aware of re-triggering another 500 feet. Should have triggered sampling at those houses that you can see through my woods. at the end of their street. And I was wondering if that has-
No, the trigger is whether it goes over the .3. I know it's close and everything, it's whether it goes over that .3 standard. Yeah,
Well, no,
that's,
what you had said was the concern was that it be half of the .3, so therefore above .15.
no, the detection limit's half of the .3. I think, yeah, maybe, I apologize, this is very, I mean, I'm not trying to, to
No, I'm not
obfuscate
confused.
this,
I
but.
mean, I've been taking notes, so, what I want to be clear that the goal of what you're going for to be considered potable water is half of that point.
No.
No.
That is incorrect.
Then what is
The reason why the-
simple goal of the, I guess?
Yeah, the reason why the detection limit is half of the standard is to make sure that there's sufficient ability to see the standard. If you're testing at the standard, then,
It would be non-detectable.
well, the laboratory has its quality, QA/QC, quality control, quality assurance. There's a plus or minus of some of these contaminants that can be extreme, but a plus or minus of like 20%. So if you're at if your detection limit is the same as the action standard, then you really don't know if you're hitting it. So typically, we're trying to get one half the standard as a detection limit. And your house did come up at .293, to be clear. And the MCP triggers this 500-foot radius at the drinking water standard of .3. You were close,
Didn't you say there's a 20% variable involved in this?
No, I said that the laboratory QA/QC can be plus or minus 20%. It doesn't mean that it was plus or minus 20%. It said it can be. And typically, there's some things that can, well, not typically, there are matrix interferences that can cause fluctuations as well as calibrations. These were drinking water standards samples. There's not a lot in them. There is one well that we have to use a different method on because it has too much turbidity in it to run the test that we want to. We still get a detection limit of down at like 0.18, 0.16, but because of the turbidity, it affects our detection limit.
If I may just follow up on one thing. You had, a couple of you had mentioned the seasonality change in concentrations. As somebody who has dealt in some water filtration issues myself, one thing I found, and is a concern, that some of these things can act much like an aneurysm, where the concentrations happen, but then they can release in a more concentrated form, with a quick change in seasonal rains, seasonal. And
Right.
I guess my concern, and I think all our collective concern in terms of being more proactive than reactive to data, is maybe getting ahead of a potential 1,4-dioxane aneurysm, I guess you could say.
Well, so-
We want
yeah.
to make sure that,
Right.
not to make this a dramatic thing, but we all know that there's an issue. There's been, for the past couple of years, back and forth on, what should we do? Are we going to spend the money? Is it a priority? Well, clearly, we're having this meeting because it's a priority, but it's become a priority because people have gotten angry because of the lack of proactiveness in dealing with an obvious issue. And I think we all just want to feel like we're being taken care of, and we're not looking for anything extra than I think what we all pay taxes to receive. And that is just being taken care of and being informed. And that has more recently improved, but it's one of those things that's great that now things are being done as they, not to be a shoulda, woulda, coulda person, but these are things that had these been addressed back when, people much who are in this arena, and if this is in your wheelhouse, on a day-in, day-out basis, this is something that based on the vote that happened in 2018 to have the system put in, I don't think I'm being naive when I say that it's a no-brainer that But it's something that this town, if it decides it is a priority, then we can put that in the town warrant and have a vote on that. There are funds, we come up with funds to cover a lot of other things with this town that are not as popular. I think having safe drinking water and mitigating, larger problems is something that makes a lot of sense for both sides of this issue.
I could try to answer, I can't answer the second part of your question out there, but the first part, I think that, as far as release, remember there are wells that are right around the landfill that monitor for the same list of constituents out there. So if there was some kind of massive release, which given this compound is unlikely, we would find it there first, and then there are a series of wells in between before we even get there. So again, it would have to move towards those homes. So there is a monitoring system for that. If all this, again, the way these reports work, they're done semi-annually. The groundwater well, you look at the last few rounds and you say, well, wait a minute, that was 10 last round, it's 1,000 now. Something happened, what happened there? And typically the first thing you do is you go back out and resample, make sure everything is good, but you proactively start to look at it. What we've seen is it's been pretty consistent for the 4 or 5 years that this has been sampled for around the landfill out there. But there is a, if you will, early warning system that's sort of in place for that.
Yeah, and I guess my concern is my place has become the new warning system location.
So the source is back at the landfill. And this is the hard part of saying, is there a seasonal occurrence in the change of concentrations? The source is a ways away, and there's a travel time to get to your location, for instance. So if there was an increase in the amount of 1,4-dioxin coming out of the landfill, I would have to look to see what the rough travel time would be, but it could be, you're pretty sandy down here, but it could be 100 days, 200 days, or longer to get from one location to the other. And we, it's not an exact science. So say it's going to show up in 155 days, if somebody told you that, they'd be lying. And the difficult part is you have these plumes that come out and they travel a distance. That plume has established itself over time. And that's why I say that it's very difficult to glean the seasonal fluctuations from a source 500 feet away. And that's all. I'm not downplaying that it doesn't happen. It does happen, but it's really difficult to make them mesh so you understand, that was a rainstorm that happened 6 months ago, and now I'm seeing stuff down here. And as Bruce said, from the landfill to the Plymouth Street, there's a series of monitoring wells and networks that are, one's monitoring the pump and treat system, one's monitoring the landfill, and then there are sentinel wells in between. And that's, you sound like you're familiar with it. That's how we set these programs up.
To that point, and based on the topography of the area we're talking about, I think I mentioned in a previous meeting that it'd be worth shifting or having an additional monitoring well of some kind just to the west of where the current one is, because it seems like that Muddy Brook area seems like a more efficient conduit for these contaminants to migrate toward. And that ends up leading up Hines and my place.
Again, from one of the things that we have to do, and one of the points of the sampling on Hines and continuing on Plymouth Street, is to figure out how do some more work of how that plume might move in that direction and sort of augment the work that was done before out there. So, yeah. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
So my name's Donna Forand, and I don't live in that area. But my concern is this: if you have an idea of how you want to set up the water for that area, should we as a town be planning for future, not just stopping at a particular address, should we be putting the piping in and maybe not connecting those homes, but at least be prepared, because obviously this project and problem has grown and grown and grown and grown, and we've just let it get overpowered on top of the town. And I also would like to see if we could do something this year to get it all instituted and up and running, some type of project started. And if, obviously, these aren't the right people here, I guess we need to go between people of finance and the select board to see if we could get some money from the reserve fund to take care of this and get it going. So, I mean, that's not your question, but.
I think the answer to the first part, yeah, the idea of nature and extent of this plume, this contamination, how far has it gone and things, that's one of the goals to try to determine. And I think one of the hard things here is, going to town meeting, in 2 months, a month or so, and getting approval, and then having, maybe it has to go a little bit further. Again, that's what we're trying to exactly understand what that is a little bit better, how far sort of to the east on Plymouth Street it might go out there.
In the future, like suppose in 5 years from now we have the same problems, why not be proactive today for 5 years from now? That's what. For instance, my family was involved out on one of the islands when they came and had to put the water in out there, and they were proactive on this. They didn't, people didn't have to hook up, but they had it all set up, so when that time came that they could hook up.
I think we have to have a good discussion. I mean, again, there's a lot of, there's layers of that question. I understand. I think that's, I understand your point, and I think it's an excellent point. We don't want to run the water to, house X and then find out the next door neighbor needs it 3 years from now out there, and then, have to go back to that. I mean, it's really, that's one of the goals of what we're trying to do out there. Yeah. Okay.
Just one question. I know that back, it was asked a lot at town meeting 2018 for the original funding of $300,000 or $350,000. I know that we're not paying a betterment if we're part of this program. We're also exempt from the hookup fee, is that correct? To hook up into our...
I don't know.
Yeah, I think
I know that was asked at town meeting. Back then it was funded.
So there's a precedent for that. Those kind of things are negotiable. And in terms of the question that was asked about, are those residents that are hooked up going to pay a water bill based on the fact that we did not unline the landfill. So these are things that I know aren't things that you can answer, but there's a precedent in other towns in Massachusetts alone where that's something that we can negotiate. So and if I believe if the town is in tune with our concerns, I would imagine that that's something that would be possible. We should all bring that specific subject up at that time.
I don't know the answer to your question. I haven't heard that discussed specifically about the hookup fee, and again, obviously about the long-term water bills. Is there anything else that we can try to answer? And we'll be here. We'll stay around for a while if something else pops in your head out there. So I think our next steps really is you'll be hearing from. So everybody who attended here and everybody who received the notice for this meeting on the three streets will be getting a notice from Kevin. Again, we're looking to get out there the week of March 23rd. That notice will have a specific date. I will say when we go out there, we will add the one home that came up this evening. And when we go out there, they do, the sampling person does go out and knock on everybody's door on the chance, even if you didn't get back to Kevin. But it will be, they'll be out there between a particular time to take the sample. And then once we get the results, which usually takes 2 to 3 weeks, we'll share those results with you and each of the homeowners individually, for your home. And you can ask any questions out there. Obviously, if there's some actions that have to be taken, providing bottled water, things like that, then that will work, work with you to get that those issues addressed immediately out there.
Bruce,
Yes.
you want to ask Angela if she has any?
Oh, Angela, I'm sorry. Do you have any questions or anything you want to ask?
I don't have any questions. I just want to make it clear to everybody that, the program under the MCP is a semi-privatized program. So we don't actually, we being Mass DEP, Waste Site Cleanup, we don't approve anything. So I know the messaging in the past had been that we approve of certain things. That's not necessarily the correct way to phrase that. I'd say that if anybody has any issues about what's going on, to feel free to call me. I'm happy to explain it. When it comes to the water line, Mass DEP can't force it, but they strongly suggest a water line when there's been previous and current impacts. So it would be up to the town to vote that in, and it can be tricky. I've seen it happen. I've seen it be an issue in other towns. Believe it or not, it took years for one town to get that water line in. But just understand that we can't come out and say you absolutely have to have that water line. That has to be something the town needs to agree on. And again, I just want to reiterate, I'm in the office pretty much every day. You can give me a call. My contact information is pretty easy to find. And I think that's it.
Okay. Everybody hear that? Fine? Okay, good. Thank you, Angela. Okay. Thank you for coming, I guess. Thank you for coming. Luke and I will stay around for a little bit if you have any specific questions on the map or anything that you want to take a look at.
Thanks for coming and answering the questions.
Oh, no problem.